I'm not going to bury the lead right here. We're going to start off showing you guys what this ring can do right off the bat. So what I have right here is a very budget build. This is about 10 divines put into a very, low level void battery, power charge stacking, blade vortex occultist, right? This is cold occultist, regular standard thing. We got two, one divine jewels right here, putting our fizz damage up, some simple crit multi-jewels, nothing crazy. We got our one inner conviction right here. This is just a shell of a build, Skin of the Lords, couple really cheap circles of guilt right here. Nothing crazy, 25.6 million DPS. This is about what you would expect, right? As a shell of a build, you can put this together for about 10 divines on league start, and you're doing okay, right? What if, first week of the league, maybe you got the original scripture, you did your no-hit run, and you got an original sin ring. This is with the exact same gear, the exact same gems, exact same passive tree. This is a level 83 character. I moved a couple passes around to go for chaos damage instead of some cold damage, but that is it. All right, so the original scripture right here is how you get the original sin. This is a very rare drop from the end boss Lycia in the Sanctum. And what it says is you have to do a no-hit run, effectively. You can't heal, you have one resolve, can't get inspiration, anything like that. Very kindly, Captain Lance was doing carries for people, and he offered to do a carry for me to get the original Sin Ring. It was very fun content on stream. We were telling jokes, and it was really fun. But yeah, we did a no-hit carry run. If you're interested in doing that, he has a bunch of videos now with an hour-long guide. He has a guide for his Icicle Mine build. My build, unfortunately, is just not very good for it. Damage over time, I don't freeze the enemies, I don't hit everything off screen. So Captain Lance did a carry for me. He wanted to see what I would do with the original sin. And we're going to start out nice, slow, and boring because I think this is going to be the most interesting thing for you guys. So yeah, let's talk about why this ring is so good. So the pros, this is the really big thing, is we don't have to worry about negative res anything. We don't have to worry about cursing for elemental weakness and frostbite, flammability, connectivity, anything like that. We don't even care about despair because this very explicitly says the chaos res is 0. So even on our helmet, when we craft up our helmet, we don't even go for nearby enemies have minus chaos res. We don't care about any of that at all. When something in the game says is, or always, or never, that will override anything that's like scaling it. So what that means is when we're looking at our curses, we just look at what's remaining, right? Ellie weakness is gone, frostbite's gone, despair is gone. What's left? So we can do our marks, we can do assassin's mark, and we can do punishment, which is increased damage taken. And it's actually a lot of increased damage taken. Right? Punishment right here says 66% increased damage taken while the enemy is on low life. If you don't have any other source of increased damage taken, that is a 66% more damage multiplier, when they're on low life, which is at 50% now after it got buffed. And then also because of that, we don't care about exposure. Exposure just says, enemies have minus 10 fire res. Because we can't affect that, we don't worry about scaling exposure at all. The way that damage in this game is generally balanced is elemental and physical damage, especially physical into elemental damage conversion. We get a lot of as extra, we get minus res, we get all that type of stuff. And then we can just hit really, really hard, but sources of increased damage taken are very hard to get. Really, really big hits. A lot of that gets countered. If we mouse over this, we see that pinnacle bosses actually have 50 elemental res. And so normally that 50% enemy elemental res on a pinnacle boss, we would have to use 2 of our curses just to counter that. And now that is just totally out of the equation right now. Normally the 30% chaos res, even if we're converting to chaos, we'd have to use despair for that. And now since it's 0, we don't even care about despair. And that just relieves the pressure for what we're going for scaling our damage in this build. As always, penetration is very good. We like penetration. Penetration happens after minus res. Even if they have 0 res, 10% penetration is just 10% more damage. So any source of Chaos Pen that we can get on this build is incredibly good. So we're going to want to go into Heart of Darkness. Chaos Pen is actually kind of tough to get, particularly for spells, but we will be going into Heart of Darkness right here. That's just a 7% more damage multiplier, which is obviously really great. Normally it would just be linearly scaling off that 30% minus 30% from despair, but now it's just a straight up more damage multiplier since we're not changing the res at all anymore. All elemental as extra is really good. What this means is if we have 100 fizz damage and then we have 100% fizz to cold conversion, because we want to convert to elemental damage. Original Sin is only elemental damage to chaos. But if we start to fizz, we do 100% conversion to cold, but we also have 50% fizz as cold. That will actually turn it into 150 cold damage. And then at the end of that, all of that cold damage, cold, fire, lightning, that will all convert into chaos damage, which all of the increases will be equally good on this build. And then I've kind of been saving the best for last, and this is where most of the damage comes from. So traditionally, increased damage taken is really hard to get. That's why something like Bottled Faith is so strong if you're doing like an elemental crit build. Not only do you get a lot of crit chance, but just that 10% increased damage taken, you're probably not going to have too many sources of that, if you're just doing Fizz to elemental damage. If you have no other sources, that's just a 10% more damage multiplier. That will send you from 20 to 22 million DPS. Now, the way that chaos damage is balanced in this game is the numbers of chaos damage are usually lower. They're actually significantly lower until you're at your max wither stacks. Chaos damage will actually be really, really low. And that's kind of one of the uncomfortable things about that is that ramping period of getting your wither stacks up until you get that, big increased damage taken. However, if we're doing Fizz to elemental conversion, we get that big initial damage, right? So normally if you're doing like 100 Fizz damage, the equivalent would be like 50 chaos damage. It's like balanced for having Wither for chaos damage, and then Fizz doesn't have access to Wither. However, this allows us to use Wither with Fizz to elemental damage conversion. As you can see, this is 135% more damage. So if we go into a quick little overview of how damage works, the way that you want to look at it is you want to take all of your increased damage, right? You have like 10% increased, 20% increased, 50% increased. This will be a single additive multiplier. 50 plus 30 plus 20 increase. This will be a total percent of 100% increased damage. That is just multiplying your damage times 2, right? Then every single individual more multiplier will come into account here. For your support gems, 30% more from controlled destruction, 30% more from void manipulation, 30% more from elemental focus. Each one of those is taking all of the initial damage that gets multiplied by this additive one. Each more is like 30% more, 40% more. It's just straight up, an additional multiplier at the end. And then at the very end of the equation is an additional additive multiplier, which is the increased damage taken, right? And so this, for example, would be like the Bottled Faith. So 10% increased damage with Bottled Faith. After you've done all of this stuff in the equation, then that would become multiplied times 1.1 for 10% more damage. And normally, if you're doing Fizz to cold to fire, anything like that, you kind of get stopped at like Bottled Faith, whatever for increased damage taken, and you don't really have any more sources of that, right? What Original Sin says is like, nah, we don't care about that. You're doing your Fizz conversion all the way down the line, and then all of this is like cold, fire, lightning. That all turns into chaos damage, which gives us access to Wither. By default, Wither is 6% increased damage taken, which then stacks up to 15 times, which is 90% increased damage taken. We multiply times 1.9, that's great. However, we have access in the game to Corruption, 35% increased effect, as well as this Mastery right here, 20% for 55% increased effect of Wither. So we take 6% and we multiply it times 1.55. This is a little over 9. The game will round down to 9% even. And then 9% times 15 is 135% more damage taken. So what we do in this equation is we are now multiplying all of these scalars and the Fizz to elemental and everything times 2.35 more damage. So just with Wither alone, we are over doubling our damage just without changing anything else. Just by putting on the Original Sin ring, turning on Wither, and scaling a little bit of chaos damage. But the really cool other thing that this enables, like I said, is with the curse pressure off, with the gearing pressure off, for not having to worry about scaling anything like exposure, we're now able to use something like punishment, focus entirely on going for things like Chaos Pen. Any Chaos Pen scaling that you can do is going to be a ton more damage on this build. The other really cool thing is, like on your implicits on your ring, you can do like increased chaos and cold damage. And they do the same thing for the build because we're doing a full cold to chaos conversion. And then you want to go for Fizz's extra of as many things as possible. It's Ziri's Promise now double dips because Elemental as chaos and Fizz as chaos. We're actually like super double dipping with its Ziri's Promise right now because we're starting entirely from Fizz, but we're converting the Fizz entirely into cold. So we're getting 16% as extra from just its Ziri's Promise. And then Taste of Hate is 15% as extra right here. Same thing as using Herald of Ash. That gives you 15% Fizz as extra, which will then all convert down the line. We don't care about Fizz as extra cold, Fizz as extra fire, or Fizz as extra lightning. They're all equally good for this build, which is crazy and so unique, right? Now, the downsides. There's not a ton of downsides, but the big weird question here is, how do I make this feel good? I don't know how good this is going to feel. One of the best things about cold BV is that it's cold. Being able to chill, freeze, and shatter, especially with Herald of Ice, that's kind of hard to quantify in PoB. That's one of those things that's just like the build feels good because we have that defensive layer, as well as the, the explodey and just more comfort clearing a map, right? So we can do things like use Zerfy's Heart right here, which says that chaos damage can ignite, chill, and shock. Then with chilling enemies, we can do things like Heat Shiver to kind of leverage that as extra. You can do the Expeditions and Heat Shiver combo right there. Really cool thing is you can, if you want to do like an attack-based Original Sin, you can use the experimented base type right here, the Anarchic Spirit Blade. 100% fizz converted to a random element. This is kind of like a baby Void Forge thing. The reason why we can't use Void Forge is because it says deal no non-elemental damage. And since we want to do chaos damage, that doesn't work. But this weapon right here, if you want to do like a big fizz attack that then gave you a full conversion, could be really, really cool right there. So that's kind of a thing if I want to go that direction. And I might go that direction after I do the Blade Vortex setup. But yeah, everything that you see in my inventory right here, I bought 2 Void batteries at 100 chaos each. I bought this helmet for 1 divine. It's a Blizzard crown with the Blade Vortex duration. I'm going to hit that with a Warlord, get +1 power charges. The real cool thing about this craft is we no longer care about nearby enemies minus, which normally you'd want like a high level base for, and you'd want to like Awakener Orb and everything like that. We can just use a Warlord and just roll +1 power charge and crit multi because we don't care about that mod anymore. It actually makes the rest of the gearing on this build way, way cheaper. I bought an Eldritch Battery, Skin of the Lords with the 222 colors for 30 chaos. I bought all of these gems for 1 divine. I was buying even just non-quality gems, just really, really cheap ones, not worrying about Vol Blade Vortex right now. This amulet was 1 divine already crafted up. If I wanted to go much bigger, I could go for Fractured +1 and then roll Fizz skill on top of that. But I'm just trying to keep this like as budget as possible, plus a 100 divine ring, right? Like I recognize how expensive and rare this ring is, but I wanted to keep everything else as like, just show how powerful the ring is by itself, right? What you can do is find the Militant Faith that has the mods that you want, copy paste it from the trade website into PoB, and just double check that it doesn't brick the build. The thing to be careful about Militant Faith, if the number isn't good for the build, it'll convert like the power charges, convert your life, something like that, and then you won't get the value out of that. What I went for is area damage and effective non-curse auras. You could go for anything else. You could just buy a really, really budget one. The most important thing here is High Templar Dominus, which then gives us Inner Conviction, which is more damage per power charge. So the Militant Faith, I bought a really good one for my build for 2 divines. This Circle of Guilt, just to increase chaos damage, and then we wanted Herald of Purity and physical damage. This was only 100 chaos. Perfectly rolled Azirius Flask was 50 chaos. A 15% Fizz's extra Taste of Hate was 150 chaos. You could go down a little bit and only spend like 75 chaos if you want to get just a couple percentage points off. Cluster Jewels each with Battle Hardened, Force Multiplier, and Iron Breaker. Each one was 1.5 divines, so that's a total of 3 divines. The reason we want this is just as much physical damage as we can get on the build, as well as chance to deal double damage. These might not even be the perfect ones, but they're the easiest to get for a total price of 10 divines plus 100 divine ring. So like I said, I just wanted to keep this as budget as possible. This is like league start, double void battery, cold BV, occultist. You're just running around, feels pretty good. You can probably kill the pinnacle bosses, but Ubers probably feel pretty bad. But if you get lucky, you get an original sin and you respec a couple points into chaos damage, then you can do 110 million DPS. So what I'm going to do on stream today, I'm going to put this together and see if I'm doing over 100 million DPS, see if it's just a very silly budget glass cannon Uber killer, and just see what this ring feels like. I'm really excited to play around with it and see where it goes. So yeah, after this build is put together, I'm going to keep you guys up to date. Pretty cool ring. Well, fingers crossed that it goes core, and I think there's a lot of untapped potential here with this item. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Goodbye.